Hello, glad to have you here. This is from the CBN, bringing you weekly reports and expert analysis of the actions, policies, and economic initiatives of the Central Bank of Nigeria. I am Oluyemisi Dada. 9 members of the CBN Monetary Policy Committee met on Monday and Tuesday this week to deliberate on the near-term direction of the monetary policy, faced with cautious optimism for the recovery of both the global and domestic economies. The press briefing that usually follows the MPC meeting had a little twist to it this time, as the CBN Governor, Mr. Godwin Emefiele, announced a major decision of the bank concerning the foreign exchange market. We have details of all that, plus our chat with Chief Economist, PricewaterhouseCoopers Nigeria, Mr. Andrew Nevin, on the outcome of the MPC meeting. So stay with us. All members of the CBN Monetary Policy Committee present at its July meeting in Abuja earlier this week voted to retain the benchmark interest rate of 11.5% along with other policy parameters. Briefing the press after the meeting on Tuesday, the CBN Governor, Mr. Godwin Emefiele, said the committee decided to hold the interest rate as tightening could hinder output growth while loosening could heighten inflationary pressure.
In the committee's view, the current situation neither gives room for tightening, as this will hurt output growth, nor loosening, as this will exacerbate inflationary pressure. On tightening, MPC feels that whereas this will limit excess liquidity available to attack the foreign exchange market, it nevertheless feels that tightening will reduce money supply and thus inhibit the ability of deposit money banks to create credit that is needed to stimulate manufacturing output, which could also help to moderate prices. On loosening, whereas MPC feels this should transmit into market interest rates, which could improve the ability of obligors to repay their loans and reduce NPLs. It nevertheless feels loosening would not only exacerbate inflationary pressures, but this would increase negative real interest rate of return and discourage investments in the domestic economy. Based on the above considerations, the MPC made the decision to hold all parameters constant, believing that a hold stance will enable the continued permeation of current policy measures in supporting the recorded growth recovery and macroeconomic stability. The committee thus decided by a unanimous vote to retain the monetary policy rate at 11.5%. In summary, MPC voted to 1. Retain MPR at 11.5%, 2. Retain asymmetric corridor at plus 100 and minus 700 basis points around the MPR, 3. Retain the CRR at 27.5%, and 4. Retain the liquidity ratio at 30%.
Mr. Emefiele, at the beginning of the MPC press briefing, had stated that he would be making an announcement regarding changes in the foreign exchange market and had urged everyone present to stay tuned to the breaking news. That was a rare occurrence, and it left everyone except members of the committee wondering what the announcement could be all about. Having read the decision of the committee to retain all policy parameters, the CBN governor swiftly moved on to the big announcement relating to bureau de change operators in the country, saying that the CBN had noted with disappointment and grave concern that the BDC operators had abandoned the original objective of their establishment and had become a conduit for illicit forex flows and grafts.
Whereas the bank has an understanding with bureau de change operators that they make a small margin from sale of the US dollar allocated to them per week, they have reneged and become somewhat greedy, recalcitrant, with abnormally high profits from these sales, while ordinary Nigerians have been left to feel the pain and therefore suffer. Rather than help to achieve the laudable objectives for which they were licensed, the bank has noted the following unintended and unfortunate outcomes. 1. Avalanche of rent-seeking operators only interested in widening margins and profits from the foreign exchange market, regardless of prevailing rates in the market. 2. Gradual dollarization of the Nigerian economy with attendant adverse consequences on the conduct of monetary policy and subtle subversion of the cashless policy initiative of the Central Bank of Nigeria. 3. Prevailing ownership of several bureau de change by the same promoters in order to illegally procure foreign exchange multiple times from the central bank. 4. Numerous and repeated financing of unauthorized transactions with foreign exchange procured from the Central Bank of Nigeria. 5. Indeed, we have evidence that several international organizations, embassies, regrettably, and development finance institutions operating in the country patronize BDCs through illegal Forex dealers to fund their local operations in further and flagrant contravention of our foreign exchange laws and regulations in Nigeria.
It said that the committee, after an exhaustive and comprehensive deliberation, reached the conclusion to, among other things, stop the sale of Forex to bureau de change operators.
A. First, the central bank will henceforth discontinue the sale of foreign exchange to bureau de change operators. B. The bank will no longer process or issue new licenses for BDC operations in the country. This stoppage extends to all licenses being currently processed, regardless of the stage of that processing. C. The bank would henceforth channel a significant portion of weekly allocations currently meant for BDCs to commercial banks to meet legitimate FX demand for ordinary Nigerians and businesses, whether for small-scale imports, medical bills, educational expenditure, personal and business travels, or any other legitimate needs as prescribed by the CBN's Foreign Exchange Manual. D. All commercial banks in the country will, with immediate effect, create a dedicated teller point in designated branches for sale and disbursement of foreign exchange to customers who desire FX for legitimate purposes. For emphasis, the public should note that once a customer provides the basic documentation to purchase foreign exchange, all banks must immediately, either on demand or within a stipulated time frame, sell foreign exchange to the customer. Any customer who does not receive foreign exchange along these lines must report this to their bank, and where they are unsatisfied with resolution, they are required, indeed they must, contact the CBN on our toll-free line number 070-2255-226. I repeat, 070-2255-226, or email cpd@cbn.gov.ng. Repeat, email cpd@cbn.gov.ng to lodge a complaint with details of the bank's transaction.
Meanwhile, furtherance to the MPC briefing, the CBN had on Wednesday written to all deposit money banks, reminding them to set up teller points at designated branches across the country to fulfill legitimate Forex requests for personal travel allowance, business travel allowance, tuition fees, medical payments, SMEs transactions, among others. In the letter, Director of Banking Supervision Department, Mr. Haruna Mustafa, said the deposit money banks are expected to adequately publicize the locations of the designated branches and make necessary arrangements to sell Forex to customers in cash or electronically in compliance with existing regulations. Mustafa strongly advised the banks not to refuse Forex to any customer, provided that documentation and all other requirements are satisfied, and he also urged them to resist diverting the Forex. He added that the CBN will continue to closely monitor banks' conduct and compliance with the directive. Similarly, the CBN has informed promoters of Bureau de Change and all deposit money banks that it will begin the immediate refund of capital deposits and licensing fees to those who have pending BDC license applications with the Apex Bank. In a circular from the Financial Policy and Regulations Department, signed by Mr. Ibrahim Tukur on behalf of the director, the CBN advised affected BDC promoters to forward their request for refund in writing to the department, accompanied by relevant documents listed in the circular. In addition, all deposit money banks have been directed to stop accepting instructions from customers to transfer a capital deposit of 35 million naira to the designated CBN account for the purpose of applying for BDC licenses going forward.
Oh, I see. Just hold on. In that case, let me call out my PIN. It is 41.
Uncle, please stop.
Stop what?
You're giving someone else your personal identification number PIN?
Not someone else. It's from my bank.
Please hang up, Uncle. That's a fraudster.
That's not true. But they call out my full name. I am sure this is from my bank.
Uncle, no bank is ever going to call you to ask for your personal identification number PIN, your mobile banking password, or your card verification code, CVC.
But it sounded so genuine.
Yes, hackers and fraudsters always sound genuine. But please, Uncle, don't fall for their bait. Don't respond to any phony emails, text message, SMS, and don't click on any link you're not sure of.
Even if they call your date of birth or your BVN, don't give them your security details.
If you suspect any issue with your account, please go to your bank.
Oh, I see.
This message is from the Central Bank of Nigeria.
Welcome back, and if you're just joining us, this is from the CBN, bringing you weekly reports and expert analysis of the actions, policies, and economic initiatives of the Central Bank of Nigeria. The outcome of the July Monetary Policy Committee meeting, which held earlier in the week, has been our focus today. And now let's move on to the question and answer session of the MPC press briefing.
Last week, the media was awash with news of the CBN introducing a digital currency on the 1st of October. How true is this? And how prepared are you in the face of the economy still being largely cash-based?
Yes. Digital currency is what central banks all over the world, they are providing as an alternative to the current money arrangement. What are we saying? You have some naira in your account and you choose to convert part of your naira into a digital wallet by way of a digital currency. We will support that. If, for instance, you have 10 million naira in your account, you go to your bank. So, of course, when this starts, CBN will move some of the balances of banks in CBN to those banks in digital currency. So you go to your bank, you have for 10 million naira, you say you want to move your 10 million naira, maybe 2 million out of your 10 into a digital currency. They will debit your account and move it to you into your wallet of 2 million naira digital currency, which you can spend across countries. Okay, so we think that this is a novel idea, and we are not the first. We know the PBOC in China has unveiled theirs, and many other central banks are advanced stages of unveiling their own digital currency, and our own digital currency, which is tagged e-Naira, will certainly come into operation by the special grace of the Almighty by October, and we are working very hard for this.
Last week also, the environment was awash with complaints that some banks are distressed. Can you please tell us how stable and strong are our banks in Nigeria?
I want to say that, and I repeat, that the strategic health of the Nigerian banking industry remains very, very strong. For instance, at today's meeting, data was provided to Monetary Policy Committee members, and I will say we reviewed the financial soundness indicators of the Nigerian banking industry. For instance, capital adequacy ratio averages 15.5%. For the national banks, they are only meant to have just 10%. For the international banks, those operating with international licenses, they are supposed to operate at 15%. If we have an average of 15.5%, we believe that this capital adequacy, the Nigerian banking industry is well capitalized and can meet any shocks if they arise.
I have known from James Major of this day. He said, at your webinar last week, you were quoted as reiterating that the 15 trillion Infracorp will commence operations in the third quarter of 2021. This is July 2021. Could you give us an update of the status of the Infracorp?
I made a commitment that during the third quarter of 2021 that Infracorp will take off. And you are reminding me that this is July. In fact, we are entering August, which is the middle of the third quarter. Let me give you the update. And the update is that it takes a process for an infrastructure corporation that is meant to be raising about 14 trillion naira plus 1 trillion naira equity from the equity owners. It takes a process to set up such institution that must be established in line with world's best global practice. And it starts with appointing, in our case, the transaction advisor, KPMG, into appointment of asset managers, which we have just done. I expect that in the course of this week, we will advertise we'll place an advert on the appointment of the CEO and the Chief Investment Officer of the Infracorp, and he has to be a world-class person who understands infrastructure, financing and infrastructure business, and a well-respected person. So we are not just going to take any person because we want to make sure that we get this right.
I also have a question from Abdul Wahab Isa of New Telegraph, and his question is, you delivered a public lecture at the University of Lagos recently, where you outlined some policy options for the enhancement of SMEs in the country to include proper linkage of research to industry. Are we expecting guidelines in this regard soon?
Why should we have people who graduate from, you studied agriculture, agricultural science, agricultural economics, and yet we say that Nigeria has a lot of agricultural potentials, and you have a certificate, degree in agric economics, agric science, extension services, and yet you don't even know the basics you don't even own a farm. So we are trying to say that if you are a graduate of agriculture, for instance, we would like to work with universities to say that universities have vast land. We should work with them to support them to see how they can begin to say that before you graduate, you have to even do farming on one small parcel of land. Conduct research about the seedlings, conduct research about the type of fertilizer or other inputs that you can put in a small piece of land that will give you the highest possible yield and output. I repeat, this is a time. Don't forget, as a result of COVID, every country has closed up. We got to a point where people who could produce drugs held on to their drugs. People who could produce food held back their food. How could a 200 billion population country survive? That is the reason we are determined and saying, if accessing credit is your problem, we will solve that problem for you. But just be committed and dedicated to say that when you take a loan, you must pay. So between the time when I held that lecture and now, we had sent our development finance officers to all the universities. They met with the committee of vice chancellors at the meeting, and they have also gone to each of the universities to access the needs, based on which a framework to support the initiatives of the university. It's not about agriculture alone. I just talked about even pharmacy. Why should a pharmacy graduate come out and become just a drug dispenser and he cannot even produce common sanitizer?
Number one question is, are you sure that the political authorities support this decision? I'd like to know that. Then number two, are you also concerned that this would add pressure and also push up the FX rate?
The Monetary Policy Committee did deliberate extensively on this. Not at just this meeting. This is an issue that even our leaders, even the political authorities, have engaged the central bank on. And we've tried our best to see to how we can defend the bureau d'echange operators. And put bluntly, even our leaders who constitute the political authorities have raised concerns about the modus operandi of bureau d'echange operators in Nigeria. We did our best to defend it, to say that they play certain roles in the economy. At this stage, we can no longer continue. So if you ask me the question, are we carrying the political authorities along? I will say the political authorities themselves have long sought that this should stop.
Mr. Andrew Nevin is a partner and chief economist, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Nigeria. In a virtual interview, he shared with me his insight on the decision of the MPC to retain interest rate and other policy parameters, as well as other moves of the CBN. Have a listen.
In reaching its decision, the Monetary Policy Committee considered loosening, which it said would lead to a higher inflation rate, and tightening, which will lead to limits of credits to very important sectors of the economy, which was why it's decided to retain all policy parameters. In what other ways can inflation be tamed in Nigeria?
Well, I mean, the reason I don't even want to call it inflation, but it's a real problem at 19%. It's an enormous burden on the bottom of the pyramid, on the poor people in Nigeria. We all understand the food inflation. It's just terrible. So it's a real issue. But what is the fundamental cause of it? It's not the CBN's monetary policies. As I said, they've always chosen the right technical numbers. The fundamental cause of it is it's hard to do business in Nigeria. It's hard to produce foods from an infrastructure perspective, from a power perspective, and that drives up the cost of everything, and we're all suffering from that. So what I've always said is the CBN is doing its role in the economy. Other economic actors need to do their role. So in particular, if we want to get a control of inflation, which we absolutely have to do, 19% inflation is not sustainable. Something is going to break in the country at that level of inflation over time, but we need to focus on those fundamentals, getting the infrastructure to work so it's a reasonable cost to move goods around the country, getting power to work so that we can produce things at a reasonable cost. We need to have the growth in manufacturing that we all want, so we need investment in there. So none of these problems, and the CBN has done so many amazing things for the economy, but they can't fix all of the issues. And the only way we're going to get inflation under control is fix some of the fundamentals.
What changes do you expect to follow the decision of the CBN concerning this stopping of Forex sales to bureau de change operators in Nigeria?
Well, I think this is part of the journey of the central bank of Nigeria to have a naira that is floating and determined by the market. I mean, this was announced 4 or 5 years ago now with the economic recovery and growth plan that we would have a market-determined exchange rate. There have been steps in that direction. It hasn't fully happened. But I'm not surprised that they've now said that the BDCs won't get dollars, because the incentive to round trip when you have the gap between the parallel market and the official market is so great that that's inevitably going to happen. So I think that the pressure is on to have a unified exchange rate. I'll go back to the point I made about attracting investment to Nigeria. There's no way to have a strong naira without attracting significantly more investment. And one of the primary reasons people don't want to invest in Nigeria despite its incredible potential is because of the confusion around the exchange rate. So if you want to stabilize the naira, our view has been publicly for the past number of years that we need to have a unified exchange rate. Of course, Egypt went through the same process about 4 years ago. It was very positive for the economy. We all understand why the central bank has tried to direct the foreign exchange, the scarce dollars, to the highest value use for Nigeria. But in the end, the policy is not quite working. And as I said, we've taken the steps to a market-determined exchange rate.
So it's not a big surprise if the CBN has decided to plug this leakage in the economy.
And that wraps up this week's package from the CBN. Remember to check out the website of the Central Bank of Nigeria using www.cbn.gov.ng to learn more about its various economic intervention schemes, or better still, locate the CBN branch office in your state. You can call the CBN contact center using the phone line below for your valid complaints. Remember, local queries may apply. Keep sending your comments and contributions to the email address from the cbn@gmail.com and follow us on the social media for updates and uploaded episodes of the program. Join us again next time. I'm Liam Misleader. Bye for now.